And so we have as our last presentation here, and it's a knockout group, Jack Porter, Randy Haykin, Francis Pedraza, and Yifan sang. Thank you very much up there.
All right, well, I'm Jack Porter, and our talk tonight is really about the power of purpose. And in the tech industry in general, but in Silicon Valley specifically, there's been a major power shift. And that power shift has really affected the startups in like 4 or 5 different ways. And so that's what this discussion is going to be about. And we're going to start by talking about what it's been like to go from the dot-com to the lean-com. And Randy and I we're very active as founders in the dot-com era and investors in the lean-com era. And Francis and have been in the lean-com part of it. So we're going to start with you, Randy. You were involved in both pieces of it. Give us a feel for what it was like and what kind of power shift did you see as you saw that shift from investor to founder, from dot-com to lean-com.
So I'm the old guy, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I'll kick us off on just some thoughts about having lived through a couple of rounds of Silicon Valley. I got started in '88 at Apple, so I've been around since '88 in the Valley. I guess, first of all, just being a founder during the early '90s, mid-'90s, the concentration, if you think about it, the concentration of venture firms and angels, those that were kind of providing the fuel for power in the Silicon Valley, was much greater than it is today, because as you heard just in the last talk, the democratization of investment, of social power, and all those things weren't around then. So Sand Hill Road was really, I think almost every venture firm was located on Sand Hill Road, with a few notable exceptions. And then eventually you actually could see over time, one by one, the VCs say, well, we're not going to be at 3000 Sand Hill Road, we're going to go claim our own stake. And it kind of expanded. And now you have University Ave has several very, very well-known VCs in Palo Alto. You've got VCs in Redwood City. You've got VCs in San Francisco. And it kind of just expanded. A little bit the democratization of the venture firms. But also, if you think about the angel community at that time, was very concentrated in a few maybe former founders and a few people who knew enough about investment in early stage that was one of the key things. The other thing is, if you think about it, just the cost of a startup in the 80s and 90s was considerably different from today. I remember one company I was on the board of in the 90s called eCircles, which actually did fairly well. They were acquired by Classmates.com. I remember the servers alone, just to get them started, were millions of dollars. And that was the big issue. Where are we going to come up with the money just to, we're exploding with users and we can't keep up with servers. So today it's a very different story. And I think also not only all of those changes, but the relationship back then was very different. So I remember I teach at Berkeley and Cambridge in the UK, and I remember students a while back would ask, the typical question in my class on entrepreneurial finance would be, well, how do I meet an investor? And the only thing I could think of 10, 15 years ago was go to a conference like this, stand by the door, and when Jack Porter walks out the door, grab him. You know, but now if you think today about how democratized that process is, my wife is sitting on the couch watching Shark Tank. She knows more about term sheets than the average angel or VC did 10, 15 years ago, in a funny way. So it's been completely democratized.
Yeah, definitely so. Francis, how about you? How's this change affected you, being kind of one of the LeanCom founders?
It's a massive change. I thought Randy's comments were really good to provide some context. I wasn't around in the 90s here in Silicon Valley. I was in school. Let me just provide a little bit of background about what we do at Everest. A couple years ago, I graduated from Cornell, and I came to Silicon Valley for the first time, and I had this vision for how to use technology to unlock human potential. The company that we ended up founding, Everest, helps people achieve personal goals. And our vision was that everyone has things that they want to do in life, goals, hopes, aspirations, desires, dreams, but people really struggle to achieve them because they lack organization and support. So most people don't write down the things they want to do. They don't have a process to figure out what steps to take or to fit these steps in their busy lifestyle, so they need a tool. So we thought we could build that. And then most people don't share the things they want to do or their progress, so they can't get encouragement, support, accountability, suggestions, or learn or be inspired by people who've done similar things. And so they need a community, and we can provide that. So my co-founders, Victor, Catherine, and I came together. We had an awesome board of advisors, and we met someone at an airport who introduced us to Peter Thiel, who provided our first check. I think that the title of this panel is The Power of Purpose, and that has been so true in the history of our company. Like there's so much that I've learned about the startup process, and I think financing is a really big part of it. And I think that at the core of what we're talking about here is how companies get financed. I think that the lean startup has, there's this idea that startups are so inexpensive now compared to the $1 million servers that you can hack for a couple nights and weekends or for several months and launch something, and all of a sudden you have the next eBay. And it still takes money to build companies. Startups are lean, but you still have to raise. And I think that there's this lean startup theory has really become a dominant school of thought. And one of the premises of lean startup is that most companies fail because they build products nobody wants. But I still think there's a lot of startups that fail, not because they don't build products people want, but because they don't know how to raise money. And we had to learn. I think that the seed market now, it used to be you go to Sand Hill Road with a business plan. And now you have to go on AngelList, and instead of raising from one investor, you raise from like 30. So I'm sure you found that with GymPact. Did you raise institutional for your first round, or did you?
We did not.
Yeah.
So I guess my company GymPact is my first company. Similar story. Graduated from Harvard College, and actually came up with the idea to use financial incentives to motivate specifically exercise in our case. And we have an app in which people actually get charged for not exercising, and it's paid for by the people who do exercise. So a very, very specific application of that. But we had a very similar story in that my co-founder and I both were non-technical to start with, and we both learned, me design and him iOS development to actually code our first version together. We didn't raise any money to start. We launched the product completely bootstrapped. Yep. But once we started getting traction, that's when we realized, okay, we actually need money to hire people, hire a better designer than me to actually build the app and make it scalable for the users.
Right. Yeah, my companies were all supercomputer companies, so we didn't get to do that. So you guys were both in the lean area. One of the big things about lean is, this transition from the founder coming up with the idea to the customer coming up with the idea are very engaged. I mean, in all of my career, it was one of these deals where literally I'd be in development of software for 2 to 3 years before I ever let a customer see it because of my IP concerns, and then I'd bring it out and hopefully they liked what we built. Very different model today. So what does that look like today, and how did you guys do that?
Yeah, I guess we have a very interesting way that we started GymPact. So it actually started as a project when we were in college. And we started out by using a completely paper prototype, no technology whatsoever. Worked with a couple of gyms in Boston, used sign-up sheets. and recruited people from Craigslist to test out this idea. Because I think for us, the lean methodology was proving out the most riskiest assumptions without any tech build. And we think that we could do that, and I think a lot of companies can do that. Our biggest assumptions were, would people actually sign up to be charged for not exercising? And if they were charged, would they still want to continue to use this product? And finally, would people be motivated to exercise using these incentives? And we built the entire thing with gym partners before we built the technology.
That is a classic lean startup story. That is amazing. I'd like to provide a slightly contrarian opinion, slightly different. Now, all companies are very different in this respect, but so the classic lean startup model is you launch and you iterate and you iterate and you iterate and you learn from your customers. And the whole idea is you want to fail as early and often as possible because failure is learning and learning is progress. That's very non-Churchillian. Failure is not a good thing, right? I think Churchill would. I come much more from the Churchill mentality towards like failure, which is that you can have a lot of setbacks, but oftentimes you just have to keep going. And I think that if you let's take the car analogy because we're talking about Tesla earlier. If you tried to launch the Model T today, it wouldn't work, right? You have to launch if you're going to start launch a new product in the car space. You have to launch a Tesla. The bar is so high for the production quality of the experience that you need to provide right out of the gate that you can't always go recruit your first customers on Craigslist. And so in the lean startup, they have this acronym MVP. You have to launch a minimum viable product as quickly as possible. But I think we have overstated the V, right? V is getting higher and higher every year on the internet. And oftentimes when you launch right out of the gate, you're condemned by your metrics. You almost need to be viral from day one. You need to be like Mailbox, where they were acquired by Dropbox 3 weeks after launching because they had built a viral loop before you even got into the product. So I think that there's something there in in terms of how you test ideas. You can certainly learn a lot from your customer, but there's a lot that you can do before you launch to sort of guess how they'll react. I think firms like IDEO do a really good job of that. They use qualitative insights instead of quantitative after hitting the big red button and spending
one of the issues, though, is I think, because we're here in Silicon Valley, so 80% of probably the discussions that occur at Churchill are technology. But if you take it broader, you can't always build a lean, you can't always use the lean model if you're going to have innovation and breakthrough in certain spaces. So I think it works for the example that you gave. It maybe works for Everest, but I'm not sure about some other areas. However, the innovation of Kickstarter, or what Kickstarter represents, I think is fascinating in this context of the power shift. Because if you think about Kickstarter, it's not really crowdfunding. It's really early product funding. And there's a great example, a case study on Honest Tea. How many people know Honest Tea and Seth Goldman, who started that? Where in the case study, which is used at universities all over the world, in the early 90s, mid-90s, Seth was already tapping customers to pay for the development and production of his product before that was even in vogue. If you look at Kickstarter today, it's enabling thousands of ideas to come to life. They may be costly, actually, if you think about some of the things that have received $10 million in funding for a wrist, for a watch-type appliance. And
that's not very lean.
It's not very lean, is it? But it's very smart.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the deals I did 8 software companies, and then I started investing in these guys doing lean, and I'm like, why didn't I think of bringing customers in to talk about my products? So it is an amazing thing that's going on, and there's so much you can learn. We do a lot of paper prototypes, and being able to get to there without spending a whole bunch of money on tech is really valuable right now. What other dynamics are you seeing? It used to be in the dot-com area, we were it was like very focused on Wall Street. Today it's very focused on Main Street, both in terms of how we get customers and we really get revenue, and now with crowdfunding, how do we get investments coming from Main Street? How do you guys see that impacting startup world?
You can IPO from day one on AngelList.
I know it. So Yifan, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, so I think the shift from Wall Street to Main Street is mainly about the customers and being able to build something that customers want. So I think it's very much in line with the lean methodology where, rather than trying to go out and build something that's conceptually, like in the founder's head, this amazing thing, it's about going out and actually making sure that people want it. And for us, I think we've always focused on that from day one. We really try to figure out kind of the core questions that we're trying to answer. Even after building out GymPact as a solid foundation, now we're going into new experiments. Our whole thing is we think the incentives can be applied in other areas besides just exercise. So how do we go back and test those other areas, making sure that customers actually want those new products? And we go back to the experiment phase where every new feature that we build, we want to put it out as soon as possible to answer that key question. And then we keep asking more and more questions from there on.
Yeah. One of the things you have is, it used to be that, like, if I was launching a big enterprise app, I'd have 1,000 people that could hit me day one. I flip the switch on the internet and I got 1 billion people that can hit me from day one. And so the infrastructure, you have no idea what that's going to be like, and then you have no idea what the revenues are going to be like. One of the companies we're working with right now, they launched in June an iPhone application. They're doing $1 million a month right now, $1 million in revenue a month right now. It's unbelievable the power of what this world economy can drive at us.
I love your Wall Street, Main Street point. In many ways, this is progress, right? We're talking about how great this is, this move from Wall Street to Main Street. I kind of miss Wall Street.
I don't.
Not that I had any idea. You've actually taken 2 companies public. But I think the nice thing about the way the 90s worked is that the venture capital industry needed to think really big. And I think with a lot of these companies that raise angel funding, break even, and they're lean and they're great companies, but they don't need to think from the beginning, how does this become a $100 billion business, right? And that led them to Wall Street. And I think that the structure of the capital markets is something Randy knows a lot about, and I'd love to get your takes on this, but it really frames how entrepreneurs start, right? And the nice thing about the 90s was, hey, yeah, we're going to invest in 100 companies. 99 of them are going to totally fail, but let's find the craziest ideas we can because we need to think big because one thing is going to have to return everything else. And I think that those days are largely gone, and that's sad. I think that one of the dangers of the lean startup is if everyone needs to be really, really lean, right? You can't bootstrap Google, right? You end up starting things that are easier to prove traction on, easier to validate your business model, and so you tend to focus on smaller markets and smaller problems instead of big, hard problems. And the entrepreneurs that I admire, like Elon Musk, goes and finds the hardest problem he can and attacks it like a lion. And that I think that boldness is something I miss from the swashbuckling we can do anything days of the 90s that I never got to experience. I'm an entrepreneur born in the wrong era.
That is a negative. How many in here are in the venture capital industry? Oh, good. Okay.
We can say anything. Yeah.
Wait, how can we have a Churchill event without venture capitalism? I often tease people at parties when they ask me, what's my background? They say I'm a recovering venture capitalist. And it's to this point that in the 80s and 90s, and mid-90s is when I founded Outlook Ventures, which had a 12-year run. And then at the end of that run, I started realizing how that industry was getting so bent out of shape chasing Wall Street and chasing returns. And I really love what I do now as an angel because I can just work with a couple of companies at a time. And this phenomenon that you're talking about, the pressure is not on how do we get to the next phase, to get to the next phase, to get to the next phase. It's about pleasing the customer, and knowing that there are companies out there that have the distribution set up or have the foundation that we can sell to. If we need to get bigger, they can take it to the next step. So you've got a lot of entrepreneurs today that don't feel like they need to create the billion-dollar company. They're happy just filling a need in the market and then wait and see what happens.
But do you think selling to Google, like a year in is necessarily a good thing for entrepreneurs to?
It is if the alternative is to go out of business.
Oh, that's true.
and so I think
Good
that's
answer.
one of the things we have now that we never had in my career. In my career, you had to hit the $50 million, $100 million exit, and there was no exit at 5 million and at 10 million. So if you got to product market fit, you got a great team together, and the customers didn't pick up, you were just hosed. There was nothing you could do about it. Now there's a great market there.
And I think it differs by the person. I mean, if we ask for a show of hands, how many would be happy, to cash out after a few years with $20 million? Some people will raise their hand. If you said, how many want to create a billion-dollar company? Some people will raise their hand. So it's really your constitution. It's what drives you personally, what impact you want to have, and how much time and sacrifice you're willing to put in.
Perfect setup for the last part of this, which is one of the big changes I saw was this change between mercenaries, and I guess I'd be in that role, and missionaries. And I think that right now, one of the things that you do see with young startups that I really like, I actually like that attitude of going, I want to swing and hit a home run here. Yeah. And so they're not just missionaries around their contribution and things like that, but around their passion in their life. And so, they want to change the world, and I love that. I think that's actually a neat part. So you had that one, so why don't you pick that one up?
Yeah. Well, it actually ties in directly to the link between what we were talking about earlier is a lot of the lean mentality is you try to build a product that customers want, but the famous Ford line is, if I built what people wanted, they'd ask for a faster horse, right? I think of it almost like the debate in economics between demand side and supply side economics, right? A lot of lean startup is trying to find out what are problems that people know about and are willing to pay for, right? And so like you tend to find the stub toes. It's like, damn it, I just stubbed my toe on this, and I'm like Cisco, and I'm stubbing my toe on this, and like fix my stub toe, and I'll pay $50 million for that. The visionary company has to like play chess and think a lot of steps ahead, or sort of like Steve Jobs, like tap into this deep empathy for a problem or that is hard to explain, almost ineffable, right? But those missionaries, as you put it, they're not motivated by building. Solving problems people know they want. They're trying to solve the problems that they're trying to build a product that people don't even know they want yet, but when they see it, they'll go, oh my God, that's amazing. And I expand on that. There's a lot to say. But
I think I actually disagree slightly with what
Good.
you're saying to provide some other perspective. I think that the difference here, there's not kind of this binary difference where if it's a big problem, it necessarily needs to be a big solution or a very expensive solution. I think there are many big problems where you can have a very simple kind of lean solution to go after that. I actually think that when it comes to missionaries, what I see are people who believe in solving the big problems rather than the small problems. But the method that they go about doing it, for some things, like Elon Musk and Tesla, like that is a really huge solution that needs a lot of capital to go after it. But there's many other people who go after the small, elegant solutions. And I think the lean methodology is very applicable to those.
And to add on to that, I think Lori was talking before about social entrepreneurship and giving you lots of examples, Kiva and several others. And there's a huge shift to that, as well as what you guys are talking about. And if you think about it, a big part of that shift, it's a shift in consciousness. You can see it even in corporate leadership, right? That's happening with corporate social responsibilities become a very big issue for large companies. Social entrepreneurship is sort of the hot buzzword today. So why? One key reason is in the 08-09 financial disaster global meltdown, I think a lot of people lost their jobs. They had a lot of time to sit at home and think about how can I have a life of purpose, to come back to the topic here, how can I have a life of purpose and something I can be passionate about? I noticed the students that I teach to also were coming to me and saying, you know, instead of doing a project on being a mercenary, I want to do a project on doing social good. At first, I was confused, and then after I heard this enough times, I thought, oh, wow, they want to do good and do well at the same time. So you've got a conscious shift at all levels of society, probably brought about by all of us getting knocked on the side of the head with our excesses of borrowing here in the US and abroad, and sort of settling down and saying, well, okay, what are we doing with our lives? So I think that shift has to do with an alignment of personal, if you look at founders like you two, I think it's probably, I'm going to guess, an alignment of personal beliefs with your business beliefs, more so than you would have seen 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
I think that 20 years ago it was really, there was almost not a consciousness towards that. And then as it moved forward, people that would kind of went through that mode, and I get hit with it on a daily basis. I've got some ex-entrepreneur that's doing some real good thing because he's now done being an entrepreneur, and now he's going to go do the good thing. Yeah. And what I love now is now people are like out of the gates going, I'm going to do both, and I'm going to do it right now.
And also look at our role models, and look at our role models' partners. So our role models, you know, Piero Migliari makes a fortune starting eBay, and instead of taking it all and doing whatever, he takes a huge portion of it, and he and his wife, Pamela, have been giving back to social entrepreneurship. The same with Jeff Skull, also of eBay. The same with Bill Gates, and the list goes on and on. So a lot of the, although I can't say everyone is doing this, but I think, you know, often the Silicon Valley gets criticized for not giving back enough. But if you look at the concentration of wealth and those that have done extremely well, billionaires, actually many of them are giving a huge portion. Mark Zuckerberg just making all kinds of announcements, and he's very early in the cycle. You know, it didn't even take him very long to think this is what I want to do. Mark Andreessen, and they all, I noticed, almost all of them, I could think of one exception, but almost all of them have a partner, a life partner, who seems to have dramatically changed their viewpoint. Or maybe you could say 1 + 1 = 3. So, and I think Bill and Melinda Gates are probably a great example of that. If you think about Bill before Melinda and Bill with Melinda. So it seems to be a huge shift.
And I've heard that Lorene is getting very active. She just funded one of my friends' nonprofits. It's an incredible education nonprofit. And so yeah, it's amazing what the spouses and partners do.
So time is saying we're done. Are we okay? Or what do you want to open it up for questions? Let's have 5 minutes of questions. Okay. Cool. I've got people back there waving like this. So.
Maybe we should prompt them. What about purpose and power are you curious about? The relationship between power and purpose.
Someone jump in there. Go ahead.
So, I'm one of those people trying to solve one of the big problems. That's where the Q&A might come. So I'm one of those people trying to solve one of those big problems, and I started my company with venture capital back in 2007, just before the financial collapse.
Timing.
So here I am, lo these many years later, trying to figure out how do I take it to the next step. I've done the work, I've gotten the technology developed to be able to figure out a way to replace aging coal plants with geothermal. And I'm trying to see, listening to you guys talking about a lean way to do things, I'm thinking, okay, lean, I have to spend $5 million to drill this well. I don't know how to do that without any money. So, I just like, some of these big problems seem intractable, and yet the purpose is still there, the problem's still there, and I just like trying to get a way, a path forward to get it solved.
I
I
thought we
think one of
solved
the
that
things
already.
that you have is people mistake, I think, lean for cheap. Lean means learn. That's what it means. Learn as quickly as you possibly can. And sometimes that's at very, very large levels, and sometimes that's at very low levels. Sometimes we can do paper prototyping and learn very, very quickly, and sometimes we can't. Like you were saying, developing a Tesla, it's hard to learn that with a paper prototype. I doubt you guys did a lot of paper prototypes, did you? And so, I think that's the misconception, though.
But persevere, never give in, never give in. Lift up your hearts, all will come right. Through the struggle, you'll find a way. And I think that fidelity to the problem and your passion for that problem is what will carry you through. And I think that is I think when you decide that something is valuable to you, the universe immediately asks you, how much are you willing to pay for it? Right? If you really, really value the potential impact you could make, if you really, really value what your company is doing and you believe in it, it's almost like from the second you start your company, you're getting shaken. And it's like, are you willing to sacrifice this much? How about this much? How about this much? And sometimes you just have to keep going for a long time. I really resonated with what Lori was talking about when Tesla, the whole industry everyone was saying, no, this isn't going to work, no, this isn't going to work. When you are starting a company, you are making a very contrarian statement. It's inefficient, not efficient market theory. If efficient market theory is correct, your company would have already been started and funded. You're basically, as a founder, getting on some rooftop, finding some megaphone and shouting at the top of your lungs, everybody is wrong, the world is wrong, the markets are wrong. If you guys were right, this would already exist, but it's not, so I'm starting it. And so it's this contrarian statement. You have to be resilient and develop that toughness to keep going. And I think that refusal to give in or give up is something that I admire Churchill for, and I think that it is very much lost in this idea that somehow we need to ask customers, is this right? Is this right? No, just build it right. That was sort of Steve Jobs.
So it sounds like your answer is you need to get his phone number, and when you need a motivational speech.
Yeah, I do think
I'll
it's
leave
one
that
of
to
those,
Tony Robbins.
I think it's one of those things where, a lot of times when you're a founder, you're like, why, no one would put up with this, but I will. I'll step up and do it. And that the more you do it, the longer you do it, the farther you're ahead of everybody. And I think most founders that have done big deals would go, there's 5 or 6 times this company should have gone out of business. And I pushed way through, and what I found was that hole was like an inch away from where I was at, and I could have given up. And it just completely changed. So you said time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.